So our first of the two quizzes we had assigned was the flowchart algorithms quiz, which literally had only one question on it. So we read through. A flowchart is a way to visually represent an algorithm. The flowchart below uses the following building blocks: an oval for the start or end, a rectangle for one or more processing steps, such as a statement that assigns a value to a variable. Diamond is a conditional or decision step, where execution proceeds to the side labeled true if the condition is true, and the side labeled false otherwise. And parallelogram displays a message. So we are going to start. We're going to assign our variable x the value of 3. We're going to check if x mod 2 equals 0. If it's true, we will display exclamation point, and if it's false, we will display question mark. And based on what we see in this flow chart, what value x is 3 is 3 mod 2 equal to 0. No, it is not. 3 mod 2 is equal to 1. So this will give us false. We'll display a question mark and n. So this flowchart program will result in a question mark being displayed. All right, so that hopefully wasn't too difficult. Hopefully reading through a flowchart makes some sense, and they're designed to do that. So question set number 2, simulation and modeling. Which of the following statements describes an advantage of using a computer simulation to model a real-world object or system? The computer simulations model real-world objects and systems perfectly without making any simplifying assumptions. They allow us to test real-world events without the cost or danger of building and testing phenomena in the real world. Computer simulations run very quickly regardless of the level of detail of the model. Or computer simulations are easy to debug. Well, computer simulations definitely do not always run quickly, which is why we often have things like distributed computing, so that we can have multiple different computers processing the information all at once, processing the simulation so that we can get it done faster. So definitely don't always run quickly. Definitely not super simple to debug. As they get more and more complex, they become increasingly difficult to debug. And it is very difficult to model something from the real world perfectly, because we live in an analog world and computers only think digitally. We can have values in all kinds of different ranges where computers can only have hard numbers. They don't have any kind of in between. So simulations do definitely allow us to test real world events without the cost or danger of building and testing them in the real world, but they definitely aren't always going to give us a perfect simulation of the real world, because there are often many simplifying assumptions that we need to make in order to build a simulation. A construction company is building a tall skyscraper and considering 2 different types of material to use for the beams in the building. The company decided to use a computer simulation of each option to determine which material will cause the building to be more stable. Which of the following is not true about the company's plan? The company may consider new alternatives based on the simulation results. The company can use the simulation to investigate these 2 options without ever building anything physical. The simulation will not produce usable results because actual data about each material is not available. Or the company can incorporate other factors, such as the number of floors in the building, in the simulation. Well, if we think about this, the company, if they don't like the simulation, if they don't like how it looks for either material, they could possibly consider new alternatives. They can definitely see what would happen without building any physical. That's definitely part of why they would make a simulation in the first place. And there's other things they could incorporate into the simulation as well. We definitely do have information about each material. That statement, actual data about each material is not available. That is a falsehood. So option 3 was our not true statement. And question 3. Researchers have developed a simulation of packets traveling between computers in a network. Which of the following outcomes is most likely to result from this simulation? Better understanding of how access to the internet affects the developing countries, better understanding of how binary is used to represent data in packets, better understanding of how a failed router in a network affects the flow of packets through the network, or a better understanding of how to defend against phishing attacks. Well, I don't think there's much information about developing countries in this data set. There's not a whole lot about phishing attacks in this data set. And we're simulating how packets are traveling, but I don't think we are simulating, it doesn't say that they're simulating the contents of the packets. So I don't think that it's the second option either. That third option, better understanding of how a failed router in a network affects the flow of packets through the network, that seems more reasonable because we are simulating how things travel. And if something goes down in our simulation, we can see how it works. So option 3 there was the answer. So there is our 2 very short quizzes there. And before I introduce today's quizzes, we're going to do a bit of a recap on what we learned in the internet unit. So today we're going to cover IP, DNS, and routing. So if you remember back to our internet unit, remember that the internet is a huge and interconnected system of different routing devices. If I want to connect one device to another device over the internet, the first device will be talking to a router, and that router will send their message to another router, and that router will send their message to another router over and over until eventually the message has made it to the router that the second computer is connected to, at which point the message can be fully relayed. So in order for 2 devices connected to the internet to find one another across this huge network of routers, every single device needs to have a unique address associated with it. We use a system called the Internet Protocol, often shortened to IP, to accomplish this goal. So the classic IP address is the IPv4 address. This is the one with which most of us are likely at least somewhat familiar. So here we see a sequence of 4 numbers. Each of them can be anywhere between 0 and 255, which is the amount of numbers we can represent using 8 bits. So we have 4 sequences of 8 bits to represent a single IP address. If we look at our different pieces, we've got the leftmost one is our network address. Next, we have the subnetwork address, the sub-subnetwork address, and then finally the actual device address. So here we're moving left to right from more general to more specific. We're honing in more and more specifically on where this device can be found across the entire internet. Now, that was an example of an IPv4 address. Like I said, we had 4 chunks of 8 bits to store the value, total of 32 bits, and 2 to the 32 is over 4 billion different addresses. Lots and lots of devices. However, we have definitely reached the cap for what IPv4 can handle. It's not able to handle more devices being added. So we are using, or we're starting to use a new system called IPv6, which uses 128 bits to store its addresses. If you remember our relationship, our equation, the difference in number we can store with x and y. X here is 32, y is 128, and the difference was 2 to the power of y minus x times as many values. So 128 minus 32 is It should be 96. Pretend I can do math. But an astronomically large number more values can be stored with 128 bits. And here is just a single example of what an IPv6 address looks like. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chunks of 4 hexadecimal digits. So there's a huge number of different values here. This is fairly well future-proofed. We don't envision this going anywhere this anytime soon. There should be enough devices for the foreseeable future. So those are IP addresses. The domain name system, or DNS, is a tool that is used by devices connected to the internet to find the server for a website that they want to interface with. So anytime we want to request a file from a web server, whether it's that website's homepage or some file you're trying to download, whatever you need, your computer needs to know where to find that server so it knows where to send the request. So the first part of the DNS procedure starts with URL for Uniform Resource Locator. So URLs are comprised of 3 different pieces. We've got our subdomain, second level domain, and top level domain. So here we are moving from general on the right to more specific on the left. We've kind of inverted our specificity arrow here. So when we are trying to find the IP address for a specific website, we're going to be requesting from a sequence of servers for this increasingly specific information. So first, our computer is going to ask the root server, where can I find information about .com websites? So the root server will tell you where to go for that. And then we'll ask the com server, where can I find information about example.com? We'll go to that server and we'll ask example.com server, where can I find information about www.example.com? And then that should finally tell you the actual IP address for the server we want to communicate with. So we're going to go more and more specific, finding IP addresses for the website we want to visit. And then we can send a message to that IP address. And one of the reasons that the internet works as well as it does is because it is distributed across a wide number of computers. A wide number of devices are used to route information from point A to point B. So there's no one device taking on a majority of the required load. So there's a whole bunch of different potential paths from one device to another across different routers, which gives this system a lot of redundancy and a lot of fault tolerance. If we go back to our little diagram at the beginning, we can find multiple different paths from computer A to computer B if we follow different lines within this network. So this allows us to, if some server goes down, if a router goes away, we can still connect point A to point B. We just have to find a slightly different path. So there's our brief crash course on those 3 topics within the internet. So I will stop our recording.